All right, Tens, just thought I would make some videos on the lessons, given that I wasn't actually in class on Friday. So the first question is determine the height of the building in the diagram below. So we have a building right here. It's typically vertical, so we can assume that we have a right angle here. In order to calculate the height, we're given an angle, but in order to use the trig ratios, or SOHCAHTOA, we need to know one other side, and at this point we don't. So that means we need to take a look at some of the other triangles to see if we can find a side in any of the other triangles that's shared with this small triangle right here. Well, fortunately, we have this triangle right here, and this triangle shares a side with this smaller triangle. And they both share this side, which we'll call x. So what, um, what we need to do now then is use this smaller triangle to see if we can actually solve for x. So when using this smaller triangle, which is not right angle, we're going to use the sine law or the cosine law. We'll see first if we have enough information for the sine law. So here we have x, and we have the angle opposite, which is 32. And then we have 105 here, and we have this angle right here. And if we can figure out what that angle is, then we can use the sine law. So let's take a look at some of the angles in our triangle. So first we know that this is 40 degrees, so we know that the angle then next to it has to be 180 minus 40, or 140 degrees. So now if this is 140 and this is 32, then we know that this angle up here is going to be 180 minus 140 minus 32, which is equal to 8 degrees. So now we know we have enough information in that triangle. We have 8 degrees as the angle. We have the side, which is 105. We have 32 degrees, which is the angle, and we're trying to find sine x. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do x then over the angle, the sine of the angle opposite. So x over sine 32 is equal to 105 over the sine of the angle opposite, which is 8. So as usual, when we want to take the sine 32 to the other side, it was being divided, so now we're going to multiply it. So we're going to have 105 times the sine of 32, all divided by the sine of 8. So if we calculate that, just bring my little calculator up here. So I have 105 times the sine of 32, make sure to close that, divided by the sine of 8, and make sure to close that. And that equals 399.8. 8 meters. All right, so now that I know what x is, I can now use it in order to calculate h. So I know that here's 40 degrees. Across from 40 is h, that's my opposite, and this side right here is the longest, so that's my hypotenuse. So I have the opposite and the hypotenuse, so I'm going to use the sine ratio because sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. So I know that sine of 40 degrees is equal to opposite, which is h, over hypotenuse, which is 399.8. So again, to move this across, it's going to become a multiplication. So I have 399.8 times sine of 40 is equal to h. So clear, 399.8 times the sine of 40 equals 256.986. When we round that, we'll end up with 257 meters. So 257 meters is equal to our height. So therefore, the height of the building is 257 meters. So if we just recap and take another look at that, we want to first take a look at what it is we want to find, which in this case is our height. So in order to find our height, we can take a look. We have a right angle triangle right here with 40 degrees, or we have a right angle triangle right here with 32 degrees. In order to use either one, we need to know one other piece of information. So if I take a look at the smaller triangle, as long as I know one of these two sides in the smaller triangle, I can solve for my height using the sine ratio. Well, if I take a look at this other small triangle right here, it shares a side. They both share side x. So I'm going to see if I can solve for x. So in order to do that, I take a look at this smaller triangle and say, well, I have an angle here of 32, and I want to find x, so that's good. So let's see if I can use the sine law. I have this lovely side here of 105, and if I know this angle, which is across from it, I can use the sine law. So can I figure this angle out? Well, I know that these two angles right here add to 180, which means that this angle right here has to be 140. And I know that these three angles right here add to 180. So 180 minus 140 minus 32 is 8 degrees. And now that I know that this is 8 degrees, I can use this small triangle to calculate x. So I'm going to do x over sine 32, the angle opposite, is equal to 105 over sine 8, the angle opposite. I'm going to take the sine 32 to the other side. It becomes a multiplication. So 105 sine 32 divided by sine 8. When I put it all in my calculator, I get 399.8 meters. Now I know what x is, and so I can use 40 degrees, height, and x to solve. This time it's a right angle triangle. I'm going to use SOHCAHTOA. So I have opposite and I have the hypotenuse. So sine theta is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So I have sine of 40 degrees is equal to height, which is the opposite, over the hypotenuse, which is 399.8. I'm going to take the 399.8 to the other side, so it becomes a multiplication. When I do the multiplication, I end up with 257 meters.